Now, on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app, O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:07 here on this very busy Tuesday morning in your nation's capital. All eyes are on our town, and that we're used to that. Let's face it, it's sort of the center of the political universe, and since Donald Trump came to town, well, things have been amplified, let's say. But certainly all eyes are on Washington, D.C. after yesterday's announcement that the president will utilize his executive authority to bring in extra reinforcements from federal law enforcement agencies to finally clean up the mess that has become your nation's capital. And we've got full coverage all morning long. 6:35, former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sun. 7:05, Denise Rucker-Krepp, who is a D.C. attorney and a former D.C. Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner who's been trying to get the District Council to do this for many years. 7:35 brings us resident and activist of the Navy Yard neighborhood, very troubled neighborhood over the course of the last several years, especially with regard to the juvenile crime and carjackings. Alyssa D'Souza will join us at that hour. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Julie, good morning.
Good morning.
And for all of our listeners who live outside of the confines of the district, whether you work here or you have family or friends who work here, or if you live and work in Northern Virginia or in Maryland or wherever you happen to be, this affects you. This affects you in a big way. And frankly, for anyone listening anywhere in our nation, this affects you because you have a right to come to your capital and know that you're going to be safe. The most stunning part of yesterday's presentation was when the president compared the homicide rate in the capital of the United States of America, with other capitals like Mexico City, Bogota, Nairobi. And we have a astronomically high murder rate compared to those cities. It doesn't have to be this way. And the gaslighting that we kept hearing everywhere. Oh, crime is actually at a 30-year low. I mean, even former Secretary of State and utterly failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton tweeted out that statistic. Trump's lying. Crime is at a 30-year low. And after all, when has Hillary Clinton ever lied to us, Julie? So now let's bring in Zack Smith. He is a senior legal fellow at Heritage Foundation. He's been tracking D.C. crime for quite some time now. So Zack Smith, is crime at a 30-year low? Violent crime, they keep caveating. Is violent crime at a 30-year low in D.C.?
No, and I think anyone you talk to in D.C. will tell you that's just not true, and I think it's important to put in context where that statistic is coming from. That statistic is coming from a press release that the Biden Justice Department put out in January of 2025, shortly before Joe Biden and his administration left office. I also think it's important to put it in context that yes, murders, other violent crimes are slightly down from the all-time highs we've seen over the past several years. But if you go back 5, 6, 7, especially 10 years, violent crimes, murders today are still much, much higher than they were pre-pandemic. And so to say that things are at a 30-year low, that is just objectively not true.
Well, I did notice in that press release put out by the Biden Justice Department, and you're right, it's the first week of January, just about 10 days before Inauguration Day, I think it was, where they specifically use language that says reported crime. Now, that's a fascinating number there because we know that there have been issues with crimes, first of all, statistics being fudged by the D.C. Metropolitan Police themselves. The D.C. commander is on probation right now, or has been suspended because of it. We also know that it's a nationwide epidemic, that certain major cities aren't reporting to the FBI Crime Bureau the level of violent crime that's happening in their cities for one reason or another. Is that contributing to the disparity here?
Yeah, 100%. Of course, if people don't believe arrests are going to be made, if people don't believe that prosecutions are going to occur, then they're not going to report violent crime. And I'll throw one statistic at you, Larry, carjackings. If you go back to 2018, there were about 148 carjackings in the district. If you fast forward to 2023, there were 957, almost 1,000 carjackings. Now, last year, the Biden administration was touting their success in combating carjackings. They claim, and I think there's some reason, as you mentioned, to be skeptical of this number. They claim that carjackings were reduced in half. even if we take that at face value, there were still 497, almost 500 carjackings. That's still triple the number of carjackings that occurred in 2018. And so to somehow imply that there's not a violent crime problem, again, it's just, I think anyone who lives, works, or visits the district will tell you that's just not true.
Zach, let's drill down on those carjackings. That is we often see carjackings from very young criminals, but there's some odd sort of laws surrounding juvenile crime in Washington and how they can be charged, what they can be charged with. Can you explain that a little bit? Because again, we're seeing this rise of juvenile crimes, whether it's the ATVs or gangs of teenagers assaulting people. We saw, the big balls guy from Doge attacked by a group of very young kids. Right. So tell us a little bit about the problems with juvenile crime and prosecuting those criminals.
Yeah, so I broke this down. I went into some depth on this on my X feed yesterday at TZ Smith. That's at TZ Smith for an in-depth dive. But basically, the problem is the U.S. Attorney in D.C. is unique among U.S. attorneys. The U.S. Attorney, now Judge Jeanine, prosecutes most crimes that occur in the district. She functions like the local district attorney, except when it comes to juveniles. The juvenile offenders are primarily prosecuted by the local D.C. Attorney General, Brian Schwab. Now, the problem with that is Brian Schwab has pledged that he will never prosecute a juvenile as an adult, no matter how egregious their crime, no matter how old they are, how close to 18 they are. He says that kids are kids. He's also made the absurd statement that we can't prosecute our way out of this crime crisis. And so it's absurd. And so what's happened as a result of that, for all their flaws, gangs are not stupid. And so gang members know that even if juvenile offenders are caught committing these very violent crimes, they'll only receive a slap on the wrist from Brian Schwab. And so gangs have gone out, they've recruited juveniles to commit very violent crimes, things like carjackings, shootings, strong-armed robberies, and that's part of the reason we're seeing such a spike in juvenile crimes in the district.
So, what was it, Benjamin Franklin that said there's lies, there are damn lies, and then there's statistics? And it seems like people who are trying to make their case here will be able to pull any number that they want to try to make the case. But is there any objective measure that we can use to verify that what we all feel, and this is, I think, the most important part of it, if you feel unsafe in a city, then that city is unsafe. I'm sorry, because it's quality of life. You should be able to walk from your home to your metro station, from your metro station to your place of business without feeling like there's an imminent threat. And I think that, palpably speaking, in D.C., people do feel that imminent threat. So I guess I'm asking, as an expert who looks at these issues, is President Trump's action here justified, and will it work?
Well, certainly it's justified. And, I saw some folks on X yesterday, to all the folks who were saying that crime is at 30-year low, encouraging them to walk in their Canada Goose jacket or with their new iPhone, walk in certain neighborhoods in the district. And I suspect many of those individuals would not feel comfortable doing that. There was even an ABC reporter that kind of broke character, if you will, and admitted that she had been targeted walking from the ABC station in downtown Washington, D.C. And so certainly President Trump's actions are justified. And the other point I'll quickly make is part of what President Trump is doing here, he's surging law enforcement resources to the district. And the reason that's so important is the local D.C. Council, led primarily by Charles Allen, a local D.C. Council member, and others, they have worked to defund and demoralize the Metropolitan Police Department for the past several years. And what's happened as a result is that MPD is now facing a record staffing crisis. Some estimates say that it will take over a decade for MPD to get back up to the staffing level where it should be. And so part of the problem has been just a simple manpower problem. And so with the president surging federal law enforcement, with the president calling up the National Guard to D.C., that will hopefully in part solve, at least temporarily, the manpower staffing shortage that the local D.C. Police Department has experienced.
Real quickly, do they report juvenile crime in the same manner and with the same statistical sort of barrel that they report non-juvenile crime?
Well, it's hard to say. To be frank, I wouldn't trust any of the data right now coming out of MPD until we figure out what is going on. But what I will say about the data is, Brian Schwab is touting that he prosecutes most juvenile offenders. It's important to realize they're not being prosecuted as an adult. And two, there are widespread problems with DC's juvenile facility. Juveniles are often released early. And even those who are released on electronic monitoring actually aren't being monitored. That's why we're seeing juveniles on electronic monitoring, wearing ankle monitors, going out and committing other violent crimes. It's really a sham in a lot of ways. And I think there needs to be a lot of attention and focus on these issues.
Well, that we definitely have. And if that was the goal, if that was the aim, it is kind of ironic that the one net result of Mr. President Trump's announcement yesterday is that the entire nation is talking about crime in D.C. or debating it, for that matter. And that's a good thing, I think. Zack Smith, one of the mighty voices at the Heritage Foundation. Look at your guy, E.J. Antoni, just landed himself a big D.C. cushy job with the administration. You gonna be going to the administration too? Come on, stick with Heritage. Come on.
I'm just a simple country lawyer, Larry, and I hope EJ is he will do a great job, and I hope he remembers us little people now that he's made the big
exactly. Let's face it, EJ's been dressing for the part for years, so it's about time the three-piece pinstripe suit finally paid off. All right, thank you, Zach. Appreciate it. He is just a simple country lawyer, by the way. I've seen he does his media hits from
He's a great
barn,
guest.
I think. Yeah, it's 6:18.
WMAL, making sense of the news. Live from the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios. Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
Yeah, D.C. residents, protesters, paid professional agitators all took to the streets last night around DuPont Circle and screamed that Trump must go. That's not going to happen. What, do they want to impeach him again? They should get Adam Schiff on that, see how that works out. Oh, he's in big trouble. We'll tell you about that coming up in a bit, Adam Schiff. But here's how the local Fox 5 coverage happened with regard to this protest. Take a listen.
Breaking right now in the district, you can see people here holding signs, gathering across the city to protest President Trump's federal takeover of the police. The live pictures right now showing you the congregation of marchers here in Northwest D.C. Protesters starting in DuPont Circle. We hear that they are making their way north of 14th Street. They are calling on the president to step down and lay off the district. Of course, we are going to have much more on President Trump's announcement and reaction. That's coming up.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Yay,
and they were
crime!
really upset. Yeah.
Yay for crime. Woohoo!
No, everything's fine here. We don't need the federal government. Although, actually, D.C. does, in fact, need the federal government. In fact, D.C. is the federal government. They do have home rule that's been instituted since the early 70s, but it is still a federally controlled district. By the way, DuPont Circle, that's 19th Street, right? Connecticut, Massachusetts Avenue, all the streets converge there. Take a gander over at 12th Street at Logan Circle, just a couple of blocks away. There was a shooting while those marchers were protesting. So one of their neighbors, one of their friends, one of their family lying in a pool of blood because everything's fine in D.C. That was in the middle of the afternoon, by the way. Take a listen to this lifelong D.C. resident speaking to NBC's local coverage. This is Cut 11.
I'm just ecstatic. I've been saying that a long time ago. The federal government should take over the D.C. Police Department.
Leroy Thorpe is a native Washingtonian who founded the volunteer group Citizen Organized Patrol Efforts, also known as the Red Hats. They walk the streets of Chinatown doing violence prevention work.
With the mayor being in power so long, I think she's kind of used to how things are going, and I think Donald Trump really wants to clean it up, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, instead of marching and protesting with signs and cowbells, they're actually...
Yeah, and these are the people who walk the streets and see the crime and protect people. They are on the ground. They see it every day. I'd rather listen to him than the boomer who walked over from Arlington to protest in DuPont. Lives in Arlington.
It took an Uber home.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's take a listen to this woman. She is a D.C. Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner, Andrea Davis.
If they are able to do that, then I think there's no problem with that, because there are pockets in D.C. that are significantly out of control. We have school zones that are drug-infested neighborhoods.
Mixed reaction from the community, but they all agree on one thing. Something must be done to decrease crime.
Again, this is the local coverage, and I want to hand it to Channel 4 there, where it's like, yeah, we got mixed reactions, but everyone agrees something has to be done. You don't even get that much from the network coverage and the cable coverage sitting up in New York City. They're saying, oh, it's fine down there. They don't have a problem.
You know, I want to say something because a lot of the sort of white people who walked over from Arlington and Alexander and Montgomery County to go to these protests. You know, Zack said something in the earlier segment about how these gangs are recruiting young kids, right? Well, these gangs are often recruiting people who are here, kids, the children of illegals that are over here. You know, these people who are marching for, I guess, pro-crime, they claim to care about this population. Imagine how terrifying it is to come to this country and to hope for a better life for your child, only to have your children used by gangs. So if you care about people coming into this city to find a better life, as they always claim, just want bread, just want a better life, right? Well, then we need to crack down on gangs using kids, and we need to crack down on gangs in general and crime in general. Some of the criminals, the children being used by these gangs, are also victims. So think about them, and thank God President Trump is actually addressing this. Yeah,
you just heard on that report the D.C. Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner Andrea Davis. Coming up at 7:05, we're going to have Denise Rooker-Krepp. She is a former D.C. Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner. Also 7:35, Alyssa D'Souza. Coming up in mere moments, former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund to talk about how this handshake might take place between federal and local law enforcement. We'll get to that coming up in a moment. Right now, it's 6:24.
Coming up, we'll talk to former Capitol Police Chief and our good friend, Stephen Sund. He has commentary on Trump's actions on crime in D.C. and a message for Nancy Pelosi. Keep it here at 6:30.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station. Making sense of the news. News Talk 105.9. News now. Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app. O'Connor and Company.
WMAL. 6:37 here on a busy morning on our program. It's always busy, but I feel like all eyes are on Washington, D.C., and that's why it's always an honor to have a front row seat to all the comings and goings in this town, especially when it's a local story like the rising violent crime problem that we've experienced for many, many years. Welcome to the party, everybody else in the media now drawing focus to it, and thank you, President Trump, for shining a very bright light on it. Coming up at 7:05, Denise Rooker-Krepp, former D.C. Advisory Neighborhood Commissioner, a Democrat who's been imploring her party to get serious about this issue in the district. 7:35, Alyssa D'Souza, a resident of Navy Yard who's taken it upon herself to be an activist, chronicling the crime going on in that troubled neighborhood. It's Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
And joining us right now is a friend of the program, former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund, who, by the way, I want you to know, Chief, I wanted you on the program as an expert to talk about the sort of relationship and handshake between federal law enforcement and local law enforcement, and also to sort of reflect on the decisions that have been made over the past several years that led us to this place. So I do want to analyze that. But Nancy Pelosi really she stepped in it yesterday, didn't she, Chief?
That's it's the gift that keeps on giving. She just doesn't want to let that go. That she keeps blaming other people for the delay of the National Guard on January 6th when it comes right down to her and her Sergeant at Arms, Paul Irving, denying it both on January 3rd and then repeatedly on January 6th. And I
yearn for the days to have a conversation with you as just a straight law enforcement expert who was the chief of police here in D.C. and a former Metro cop, but it's got to be January 6th, of course. Nancy Pelosi responding to Donald Trump deploying the National Guard to assist in keeping the streets of this town safe, says Donald Trump delayed deploying the National Guard on January 6th when our capital was under violent attack. Well, you were the chief of police that day, Chief Sund. Is that what happened?
Not at all. Not at all. And I'll tell you, it goes right back to, like I said, January 3rd. January 3rd, I requested National Guard twice to help support my perimeter. All I wanted was unarmed National Guard on the perimeter. Denied twice on January 3rd. January 3rd, we get contacted by Carol Corbin. She's the program manager for the Pentagon for the use of National Guard and DISCA, Defense Support for Civil Authorities, offering National Guard. I had to turn it down because by law I didn't have the authority to request it because I had been denied. On January 6th, while we're under attack, the riot begins at 12:53 at the White House. 12:53 at the Capitol. 12:58, I call Paul Irving requesting urgent permission to bring in the National Guard. He says he's going to run it up the chain. He has the authority to give me permission, but he doesn't. He says he wants to run it up the chain because of the influence Speaker Pelosi has over security on the Hill. He repeatedly, I keep calling him, it isn't until 2:09 p.m., 71 minutes later. That's the delay we faced. 71 minutes later. Before I got approval. People don't realize it. It took 81 minutes for that group to fight its way to the Capitol and break the first window and start entering the Capitol. And for 71 of those minutes, I was repeatedly denied any authority to bring in National Guard assistance.
That's right. Chief, it is just galling to hear her and to see her on X denying reality, lying repeatedly. She's on camera. Her own daughter took video of her admitting she's to blame. Have you ever seen any, and I don't mean me or Larry or any of the great reporters who have fairly covered this, have you ever seen a mainstream journalist challenge her on the repeated lies that she tells?
Not once. Nope.
All right. Well, Chief, thank you for clearing that up. By the way, you responded to the former speaker yesterday on social media, and you actually absolutely blew up. I don't think you've ever seen a day on social media like that yesterday. So great timing, and thank you for sticking with the truth on this. Can I ask you, as a law enforcement expert, as a veteran of law enforcement at every level of fighting crime, how did we get here? How did D.C. get so dysfunctional when it comes to just enforcing basic laws and basic standards of Western civilization?
There was a time when you had a couple of the really big cities, New York, Washington, D.C., under both Ramsey and Kathy Lanier, we'd focus on the small things. Some people will talk about it. They'll say that's broken window theory, stuff like that. You let the little things get out of hand, and they turn into big things. It's like raising a child. When you don't address those little things, it turns into what you have here. So what you have is in the 2020s, you had the city council, Charles Allen, starting to pass some pretty serious anti-police legislation that really tied the hands of law enforcement, really put the criminals kind of in charge of how law enforcement would be enforced in D.C. And that's just impacted D.C. police over and over and over. When cops can't go out there, and all they want to do, cops want to go out and they want to help support the neighborhood. They want to support their community. They want to enforce laws. When they can't, morale goes down and they leave. Now D.C. police is 800 officers below their authorized strength. You see crime out of control. You see kids on these these dirt bikes, taking over neighborhoods, taking over the Navy Yard. You have people calling in saying they have nightly gunshots in their neighborhood. The homicide rate may be going down. I think part of that has to do with the fact that police are now out there doing tactical and casualty care when they show up on things. So I think more lives are saved. But it's just out of control. People don't feel safe. You walk down there. Community centers have armed guards. They have off-duty police officers. Grocery stores have off-duty police officers having to work in it because of the amount of crime you have, the shoplifting, just the blatant crime. When people don't feel safe, this is what you get.
We're speaking with Stephen Sun. He's the former chief of Capitol Police. Can you give us an insight into how this might operate? People have to understand, if they're listening from around the world, really, that D.C. is very unique. We've got Metropolitan Police Department, yes, but then federal law enforcement. You've got your U.S. Park Police, Secret Service, FBI. You've got the Marshal Service. You've got ATF. You've got DEA. You've got Homeland Security agencies of every stripe. Plus, you've got the Capitol Police. How exactly will this work based on President Trump's declarations yesterday?
So I suspect, having been involved in a number of local and federal operations, I suspect it's going to work like a lot of them have in the past. We're going to pull together a group of like an executive steering committee that's going to be pulled together. I think right now they've identified Terry Cole, former DEA, the acting head of the DEA right now, military background, as kind of the lead for this. But they're going to do what we have for a lot of big crime initiatives. We're going to pull together all our federal partners and kind of divvy out how this should work and work together. We work together with our federal partners every day down there. There's just going to be more of an initiative. They're bringing in National Guard. And I would say, the best use for National Guard, we've used National Guard before. When I was in the early 1990s, when we had the highest homicide rate in D.C. history, probably 91, we'd bring out the National Guard regularly, but we used them in a supportive role. We used them to bring out light trucks so kids could play in the neighborhood. We'd use them to fly helicopter missions because we didn't have a helicopter for a little while. And I think that's probably the best use. I don't think putting them out on the street enforcing laws is probably the best use. It puts them in a tough position. But I think pulling together as a team and bringing a lot more federal resources in, you're going to see a lot more crime enforcement happening. But the key here, and the problem we've always run into, and probably one of the biggest issues D.C. has, is the juvenile crime. So in the past, we'd always have trouble with, before it was the Corporation Council, now it's the Attorney General, getting them to help us enforce some of the laws with juveniles. Now you have Attorney General Pirro there. I think you've got an A-team that's going to pull together and go after crime and work together as a team. And that's how I think this is going to work.
Excellent. Well, listen, and I hope the Trump administration or people at the Justice Department are drawing on your wisdom and your experience here. It would be a great thing, Chief Son, to see you have a seat at the table and be able to help bring the city back under control. Always great to talk with you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Larry.
It's 6:45.
WMAL's Vince Colonnese, weekdays at noon on 105.9 WMAL, making sense of the news.
Julie Gunlock and Larry O'Connor here. Julie, you've been in D.C. since your college intern days. I'm relatively new, although it feels like a long time. I moved here in summer of 2012. And I got to tell you, as a card-carrying member of the Tea Party conservative Breitbart movement, I was ready to hate D.C., and I fell instantly in love. The city was wonderful.
I got married in D.C. I got engaged in D.C. I have had my children in this area. It is my home.
Yeah.
I care greatly about it.
There is no doubt that in the last 10 years, maybe 7 years, if you really want to narrow it down, it's gone to hell. And it needs serious resuscitation and help. A lot of people yesterday pushing back on social media, former D.C. residents who were saying, oh, yeah, no, it's awful, and that's why I got out. The chairman of the SEC, Brendan Carr, said lived in D.C. for years, moved out in 21 because it was untenable. Friend of the program, Cassie Smedley-Doxey, who guest hosts here on a regular basis, she has told her story about how she had to move. She used to live down in the Capitol Hill region, and she moved to Virginia a couple of years ago. She literally had to have a neighbor keep an eye out while she was putting her car seat, her little infant who's like in the carrier, into the car seat because she was vulnerable for attack and carjacking.
Yeah,
friend of the program, Amber Duke, formerly Amber Smith, she's put Amber Athey, excuse me. She's put a litany of things that I don't know what's going on with Amber. She needs a personal bodyguard, for crying out loud. All the things that she had to experience in D.C. But to be fair, she grew up in Frederick. She went to college in Georgetown. She's been here a while. It's bad.
Yeah, we all have our personal stories. Look, I remember once my mom asked me, "Do you ever take the kids down to the Smithsonian?" And I'm like, "Are you nuts? No, I don't take the kids to this. What? No, I don't do that."
Goes there.
I mean, Cassie Smedley telling that story about putting her kid in the. You are vulnerable as a mom, getting that stroller out of the back, putting the kids in. Your kids are hanging on to the stroller. You gotta not doing it. And it is such a loss to raise children in a city as vibrant, as culturally interesting as Washington, and not being able to enjoy it because of the criminals.
Brent Scher, who used to work at the Free Beacon, he now is the editor-in-chief for Daily Wire. They're down in Nashville. He has moved. But I bring up Brent because I met him the first week I moved here. He was, I think, interning at Free Beacon at the time. And he tells a story about how his car on a regular basis was broken into in Capitol Hill. And do you know what the police advice to him was after like the third break-in?
Keep it unlocked.
Never lock your car. Leave your car unlocked so
Larry,
they don't break the windows.
I have like literally a 12-year-old car that's dented because of all the baseballs that have hit it, and it's kind of a wreck. I leave it unlocked. There's never anything in it. And I keep telling my husband, we will continue to get this thing repaired because in Alexandria we have problems with people breaking in. Yep. And I live by these rules. which is insane.
I saw one person post a photo yesterday from downtown D.C., a car parked on Capitol Hill with a sign. And I just want to keep reiterating because everybody thinks, there's just certain neighborhoods where you get – every city is like that. There are certain neighborhoods you don't go into, which, by the way, remarkably, these are all Democrat-run cities, and those certain neighborhoods are always blacks' neighborhoods. And they call themselves virtue signaling, friend of the African American, but they're fine allowing those neighborhoods to be the worst. But it's not certain neighborhoods in D.C. It is everywhere.
The whole thing.
And there was a picture of a car that had a sign in the window on Capitol Hill that said, "My car's been broken into 5 times. There's nothing in it. Please move on." That's how bad it is. We will continue our full coverage on this story today. All morning long. It's O'Connor and Company at 6:54.